Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Products to Platform discussion here at Citrix Converge. Delighted to have you all join me and the rest of the team. My name is PJ Hough. I'm the Chief Product Officer here, and I'm joined by Steve Wilson, Sridhar Mullapudi, and Mihir Maniar, who will be all sharing their points of view on the importance of the transition that we're going through and the relevance of developers to our core platforms. But, we're all product managers. And so I thought it would be fun to start, since this is a developer conference, and ask each of them in turn a little bit about their experience writing code, because I'm sure at some point in their murky pasts, they've all written code. So, Steve, tell me something about a software project that you worked on at some point.
So, I would say in many ways my first real job was when I joined the Java developer team at Sun. And I moved in with one other guy into a closet that they had cleared a cot out of, but they left the first aid kit in. But they gave us two Sun workstations, and we started working on code for the JDK. And the first big block of code I inherited had been written by James Gosling, who's the legendary creator of Java, who's an amazing computer scientist who liked to label all of his variables with one letter and make deep internested loops. And I spent the first 2 days trying to figure out what this code did, and I couldn't. So I had to go knock on James's door, kind of, "Hi, Mr. Gosling, I'm new and I can't figure out your code." But he was super gracious and super nice and walked me through it. And that was a really fun time getting to work on code that eventually, millions of developers have used and billions of people have used underneath it. So fun times.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, I think some of us still run a COS code that looks a little bit like that. Sridhar, I know you actually had a developer role at Citrix even for a while. So maybe you have your own fun war story for us.
Yeah, I have a few, but yeah, thanks, PJ. I've started writing code since I was a kid. I don't know, like 10, 11, 12, basic, I think, after done playing games in the computer lab, I used to start writing code. And yes, in Citrix as well, for the first 6, 7 years, I was part of the engineering team. I remember two projects distinctly that kind of, had a lot of, fun, interesting challenges. One was the last kind of the engineering project team I was part of, licensing and stuff. We actually use a third-party library for doing some of the licensing related stuff. So it's technically not all your code, right? Sometimes if you have the source code, it's so much easier debugging, but this is not your source code. So, and what happened there was the library was not multi-thread safe. So for some reason, they were like, yeah, it's fine, and they zoom it, and then we did it, and then everything would just crash. You open the Win debugger, and it's like, you kind of walk through the stack trace and the dump and everything, and it's like you find strings all over the place, and you're like, that doesn't make any sense. And it probably took me, 2 nights, 3 nights. I still remember walking down the halls in Citrix with my not PJs, but jumpsuit and kind of stuff, and finally we figured out it's not multi-threaded safe. They just didn't tell us it's straight, and so we had to work around it, which was fine. Basically making sure when you call those calls, it's only one thread that goes and all the fun stuff. So, but it definitely took me 2, 3 nights to kind of figure that out. That they were kind of lying.
Well, it just shows you that frameworks and other people's code need to be well written, like some of the stuff that Steve and team produced back in the day. But not everything's like that. Mihir, what fond memories do you have of writing code?
Well, it was a long time back, PJ. So you definitely brought us back to memory lane. So I think my master's was a thesis because I wanted to actually go into parallel processing and computer architectures in those days when you had parallel machines. So my first, my thesis was in writing a compiler to convert from C into a parallel processing language. So you can actually take a serial language into a parallel processing language, and that was actually a fun experience. And in those days, C++ was just coming out. So I wrote the entire C code mimicking like a C++ object-oriented design. right, with objects and stuff like that. So that was really cool, like to kind of look at C++, but actually use a compiler with C to convert and write the entire code in C and write a compiler with object-oriented with converting it into a parallel processing language, which was written by a PhD student in Australia. So it was communicating with an Australian student to understand the language, to compile to, and it was a pretty interesting experience.
Yeah, I think if there's a nugget here for all these stories is that actually if you get close to code, it gives you an appreciation for just how powerful it can be and how many cool things you can do with it. And no surprise that we're all still today, I think, still working in technology, trying to stay as close to the code as we can so that we can continue to do great things with software. But let's maybe move forward in time and talk a little bit about this Converge conference and some of the things that are going on here at Citrix. The title of this session is about moving from product to platform, and certainly platform is a big part of what you'll be hearing about during the Converge conference and what the sessions are all about. Not just one specific platform, but if you look across the multiple Citrix products, we have a lot of capabilities that span, and so that's, I think, the backdrop. I'm going to ask a couple of different questions to each of the guys here, and just maybe talk about their perspective on the relevance of this conference to Citrix today in the context of some of the things that are going on in our business. Steve, I'm going to start with you and maybe talk a little bit about the developer community. First of all, we've quite a number of participants in this conference, which is great to see. But what's your thoughts on the relevance and importance of this community to Citrix, not just today and over the conference, but going forward as we think more about what we're trying to accomplish with the new platform?
So it's really interesting. Citrix has a long history of having a really active technical community around it, but typically that community has been centered on what I would call system administrators and technical architects more than software developers. And so when we had the first Converge conference last year, we didn't know what we were going to get. And it was kind of interesting to see how quickly developers kind of jumped on board and were excited to play with these Citrix technologies. And so over the last year, what we found is that there's more and more that we can expose through APIs in structured ways that developers are able to use to extend kind of the 30 years of intellectual property that we've built up around application delivery and application security to develop new ways to help people work. And, just the skyrocket in this community from, a group that fit in one room in Santa Clara last year that we could feed with a stack full of pizzas to this global community that we have at the conference this year has been amazing.
That's really great to hear. And we have actually put a lot of resources online that are available. And if you look through the materials, there's we're creating, I think, a repository, not just of the stuff we've done to date, but, going forward also, which is really great for the community. Sridhar, we talked a lot about, let's say, old code and I'll say old ways of working on platforms and code. And we all know the world has moved on. And in fact, a lot of applications are getting built now using completely different techniques, including low code, or even in some cases, no code. But that means that the platform has to be different and the tools that you make available have to be different. How are we thinking about sort of that platform we're building and then the set of enablement that we're giving to developers and to other users on top of that platform?
Yeah, great question, PJ. And as anybody who's been to our Converge conference over the past year, probably has seen, our Workspace platform as well as the integration platform, including the tools we have like the no-code, low-code builder. We're actually also adding some flexibility of adding code if that happens, because I think, as PJ said, there's a lot of demand as in every organization really becomes a software company. You just can't always hire engineers to get work done, whether it's, simple workflows or simple tasks. And so you have a lot of, citizen developers and others, really smart people and analysts who can actually use something like that to simplify work, either for themselves, for their department, or for workflows. And that's the reason why, we built a great low-code, no-code platform, pretty flexible, I would say, as well as we're adding more flexibility, because sometimes in certain situations you might have to write code. So for cases where you have to write, there's a good, catch-all for that. Obviously there's a lot of tooling we built around it. For example, when you're writing code, we understand you need some debugging to do it, how simple you can spin up an environment for it, spin it down, right? I mean, and code, and whether you're writing code or no code, you kind of have to have a framework of debugging things, making sure things are working before kind of you try to push it into production and everything else. So there's a whole ecosystem of tooling around that. Obviously, you can use some of the other dev tools and from Microsoft and stuff to do that as well, to integrate. But out of the box, you have a great developer experience that we're constantly innovating around. And you can learn more in one of the sessions you're going to see in Conversion on low-code, no-code builder, as well as some of the flexibility we are adding for certain scenarios where you need a little bit of code where needed.
Great. Mihir, not everybody has the luxury of starting over with, writing an app from scratch. A lot of people either migrate existing apps to new platforms, or they modernize their app over time to take advantage of new capabilities that are in the new platforms. And I know that's been an area of focus for us to really help developers solve both of those problems. One is how they migrate their apps to the cloud, and then the second one is how they think about, modernizing those apps and yet providing the same kind of infrastructure around the app to do with the quality of delivery and the security of the app, etc. Can you talk a little bit about some of the investments we're making to help customers who are doing app modernization of various kinds?
Sure, Vijay. So I think modernizing applications is a new trend with the advent of containers and Kubernetes. Kubernetes is about 5-6 years old, so most developers are these days thinking of how they can take their current applications or build new applications using new architectures with Kubernetes and containers. And the goal is pretty simple, right? With containers, you can actually reduce the blast radius to make it a much smaller kind of a service, which is autonomous, stands by itself, can scale by itself, and it's completely automated. So there are lots of advantages why developers are these days thinking of building modern applications, whether it's on Citrix platform, other platforms, using Kubernetes and containers. So we provide an entire mechanism to these developers to build these new architectures with our cloud native portfolio with CPX, which is a container format, so that you can go and build these modern architectures with service mesh and STO and things of that sort to kind of derive that automation scale and massive capability and how we can build these architectures.
Well, that's really great. And we have a number of sessions at Converge that describe this in great detail for anyone who wants to really understand how to leverage our technology with these modern frameworks.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Steve, I'm going to come back to you and ask a question related to the community. And a question we often get asked is about how we're going to support developers when they think about either sharing solutions that they've built that they want to put out into the community, or whether or not there's places they can go to let other people know what they've done themselves or can consume something that someone else has done. How are we starting? I know it's very early days, but how are we starting to think through what infrastructure we would take advantage of, or how we would approach that opportunity?
Yeah, so there's a few different levels that we're thinking about this in terms of developers sharing things that they're building. So one is on the micro app side, we actually have a forum now where people can come and share templates and things that they've created very quickly in kind of a low overhead way. And we're starting to share some of the templates that we've built there, and then having outside developers come in and share there, where everybody can get access to this. As you go through kind of the life cycle of what you're doing and you start building things that maybe actually you want to commercialize, then we have a program that we've had for a long time called Citrix Ready, where people have been able to develop products that use other Citrix technologies or that attach to Citrix technologies. And so we've extended that program for a lot of the developer-oriented technologies so that you can come in and self-certify your solution that you've built and actually embed it into our catalog so that you can let other people know that you have it, and actually use that to start to drive business. And so we've tried to build this continuum everywhere from, hey, get something out really quick. And we'll be sharing things in the conference about where that is. And in particular, we'll have some forums or even people can just share things during the conference. They've say built for the hackathons and things like that, start to collaborate. All the way up through, I've built a commercial solution and I would actually like Citrix to help me market it and sell it. And so there's a defined path you can go through as part of our overall developer program. And we have a session on that too as well. So you can kind of see that whole journey step by step, all the way from inception and sharing up through, if that's the direction you're going, commercialization, selling, and marketing.
Great. Thank you. Sridhar, I was going to ask you maybe to talk a little bit about the breadth of our Workspace platform. We talked a little bit about the low-code, no-code solution and maybe even adding a little code to it. But we know there's a lot more in that core platform that people can take advantage of. Some of it is about building solutions, but it's also about the admin capabilities associated with the core platform, and maybe a little bit about some of the admin-related extensions and capabilities that we're delivering and really promoting this time around at the developer conference, because we know that a lot of code gets written, but a lot of script gets written as well to really manage and automate deployments and configurations, etc.
Yeah, great question, PJ. And I'll split it into two parts. The first one is, as you talked about, on the platform, it's not just using low code, no code, to write things like, micro apps and integrated workflows and things using our platform, but also building extensibility into the Workspace platform itself. For example, if you want to do some kind of a customization for a specific vertical use case, or other use cases you have in terms of, identity or other third-party integrations from a platform perspective, I think for me, that's exciting as well, right? So it's not just the only way you can extend or integrate in the platform is through low code and no code. It's actually much broader from the value you can bring to the user perspective. The second question, tell me about a little bit on the administrative side of things is a great one as well, because, if you really think about it, in the kind of the on-prem days, the platform was your PowerShells and everything else, you kind of use to create your workflows, right? IT workflows and other things. Now in cloud, it's different because, we kind of operate the cloud as a service, but you kind of have the same needs. Like you want to automate everything. Most IT organizations want to be a DevOps style organizations in automating the infrastructure or everything else. So essentially we kind of took the same problem and helped you solve it in a simpler way in the cloud by providing you not just backward compatibility with things that you already have, like for example, your scripting and everything, but also provide a modern RESTful API interface. So when you're starting something new or extending, you can use, what everybody else uses, right? So that's just, how we designed for the admin. The capabilities extend either tapping into one service or multiple services, automating some workflows as part of that, or configuring it, because, let's be honest, most of the IT people, they don't want to go and start clicking buttons and changing, right? That's okay as a setup, but it's not okay for day 2 and day 3 and day 100 operations where you want everything to be automated, right? And so that's kind of how we've designed it, but we also designed it to have the onboarding experience simple.
Yeah, Sridhar, just one thing to add. One of the things that we've seen is, so much of the Citrix community has always considered themselves to be system admins or system architects. But what we're seeing now is a real blurring of the lines between, say a system architect or a sysadmin and a developer. And you hit on the term DevOps, and that's really driving this transformation where basically everybody is on the developer team. And so even if you think what you're doing is just deploying the apps, you're thinking about how am I driving migration to the cloud? How am I doing cloud bursting? How am I doing DR? Those are all automated tasks that you don't want to drive by hand, that you want to have completely end-to-end automation. And so the fact that we've now exposed sort of this modern API set to that, it actually lets those admins come in and build really robust solutions to these problems in a way that they get empowered. And so for everybody out there, what I'd encourage you is, even if you haven't traditionally thought of yourself as a software developer, use this conference as a way to go out and get exposed to all of these technologies, and just think of yourself as a software developer and think what you can do when you take that power back to your job next week. What can you enable by using a bunch of the techniques you learn here over the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, Steve, that's a really, really good point. That whole idea of infrastructure as code, and the more of the operational side of running large complex systems getting captured in the same workflows that developers use on a day-to-day basis, with all the same, validation and versioning and rolling out with the product and being part of the code base. That's really is incredibly important, and I think it is a big transition that everyone can participate in. And it's a nice segue, Mihir, to talk a little bit about the importance of API. And if we're going to have an API first strategy for allowing people to interact with the platform, and certainly if you're building a solution that has an API first strategy, you really have to think about how you protect those APIs and sort of what you put into an API gateway. Can you talk a little bit about maybe two topics? One is that API gateway, and then more broadly, just the topic of security as it's going to apply to developers in this conference here.
Yeah, it's a great question, PJ. So after you build these applications and you want to go and deploy them, it's all about APIs. All communication to the application that developers are going to build on a platform is going to be using APIs northbound. So with the communication happening to our platform, to the application through APIs, it's very important to integrate with the CI/CD tools that developers have. So that way, when they make a change to the API, they build the APIs, we have integration with Git and Jenkins to integrate with our API gateway. And the formats we use are pretty standard formats with Swagger or Postman or any of these API lifecycle tools use, that can be used to just go and automatically go and program with the CI/CD integration to our API gateways, so that you can actually go and discover the APIs, monitor the APIs, secure the APIs, and eventually also do detection of anomalies of those APIs. Because essentially all traffic is on APIs. You want to make sure that communication is very secure, and at the same time you have authentication, rate limiting, and all that functionality built in to prevent your applications from getting hacked. So we have things like WAF and bot attack management are built on top of that API layer. So that way you can actually put that API stack right in the middle of communicating to the application, and voila, you get all kinds of protection and features that you would require to make sure your application is secure.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just to add to one point, that Steve and Mihir talked about, PJ, and infrastructure as a code, and how serious it's not just we are taking, how critical this is for our customers. We were talking to one of the customers at Summit early in the year, and they're like, look, I automated everything that you guys have. The cloud, everything else is done. And we talked about some features they need and other stuff and things we need to address, but their problem is I have one problem, because my scale, I'm not going to tell the customer, but their scale is huge, like huge. And so they're like, I'm not sitting and clicking buttons and things like that, right? We have a bot for a bot, which means everything is automated. But I do have a problem, because in case your cloud goes down, then I have to have some model where I got to retry. And so I need a pub sub model, right? Which is it doesn't matter, if your cloud goes down for 2 minutes, it's as they call pub sub model, it's sitting in the queue and it back up in 2 minutes. When the cloud goes down, I mean some service or something, it's just there. So we're like, okay, great feedback. So we got to fix it, and it's in the work, right? So it's really fun to kind of see the customers, not just, traditional kind of on-prem, how they managed it, to fully automating everything and actually pushing back on us to kind of really innovate in a model. And it's really exciting.
Yeah, and maybe that's the other really key point to make about this conference is obviously we started with a bunch of materials that we wanted to share with you, but the engagement that we get from developers is really the thing that's going to improve this platform over time. And so I'm looking forward to seeing feedback come in on the individual sessions, back to the product owners and to the engineering teams. And it's exciting to actually think about ways that we can do things at scale. I mean, for me personally, I think that, helping developers succeed is a great way to add scale to your platform, because a developer doesn't do it once, they automate it and it gets done over and over and over again. And so that's a great way to increase reach for our platforms. I just I'm looking at the time. I think we're doing pretty well. I have to say, I don't usually get to moderate. Usually I sit on the other side of the mic. I'm actually liking this a lot, getting through this entire session without having to take any questions. But I'm going to run the risk, and I'm going to open the door now in case any one of the guys here wants to throw one at me. A topic maybe that we haven't talked about that they think we should actually discuss a little bit before we wrap this session up.
I got one for you, PJ. So, your title is Chief Product Officer. So you're driving the strategy for the company as far as products. In your own words, how do you think developers fit into that strategy? And, how are you looking at that?
That's a great question, Steve. And so if you really think back even to when, probably a year and a half ago, you and I started talking about putting together this conference and your team actually helping to get that first one up and running in Santa Clara. This is, I think, sort of the embodiment of one of the next and most important chapters in the history of Citrix, is embracing the developer community as someone that has already and always been very active, but maybe not, coordinated and managed in the same way that we're going to do now. I mentioned that developers are force multipliers on platforms. Developers also hold you honest. They actually make you build platforms, real platforms with real APIs that are robust and stable and secure. And that's actually, I think, a great engineering discipline to have whenever you've got, consumers that are on your platform that count on those types of things. We'll get better. We'll build more robust platforms and we'll build, more robust capabilities. The second thing that I'm always impressed with is, and we even saw it at the very first Converge conference, I was amazed by the solutions that were built with a very small API surface area and a very short amount of time. And so the creativity of a developer community to basically do amazing things with your tools and your platforms is something that takes our products into parts of organizations that they could never reach on their own. And developers are really the only way to get that. And then the last thing I'll say is, I've been lucky enough to have worked on some very significant platforms over time. And I know just how valuable it is to have a developer community that is also committed to being successful on your platform, that can build solutions that customers purchase through various channels, that actually increases the pie for everybody. And so really, when I step back and think about, what we're trying to accomplish here, not only are we trying to make the platform robust and harden it and make it more successful by gathering all this feedback, we're absolutely trying to create an ecosystem that allows businesses and partners and developers to flourish. And that's my number one objective here with building out this developer community. Make us a stronger platform and make the community that builds on top of it successful. That was a good question.
One last curveball, PJ, for the risk of it, and then we can wrap it up. Now, obviously, developers, as we know, are kind of the lifeblood of most companies, because software is kind of what's driving almost every company's transformation, digital transformation in some way or shape. And as we've all written code, it's kind of like playing with toys. It's always fun, right? You're building something and you get something out. You feel like you've done something. You can sleep well. I mean, I'm sure it's not the same feeling when you finish a strategy document on Word or PowerPoint. Have you ever thought of I should have been the developer and always been on the engineering, instead of product and writing or getting good at PowerPoint and Word? Like, have you ever thought about it?
That's a very good question. I'll say very early in my so I like all of you, I wrote code at various stages in my career, and it turns out there's a difference, Sridhar, between good and great, and I was only good, and I figured that out thankfully early in my career, and that there were other things that I was better at, and you know, as much as I love code and I actually had a lot of fun writing code. I recognize my own limits with regard to not being a commercial software developer. And so, but I did, luckily enough, and it's the amazing thing about our industry, not everyone has the same skill around the same part of our technology stacks, but there's so many opportunities for people who can, you know, write some script, who are great at administering, you know, great at writing code, great at managing projects, etc. So, I'm lucky enough to have, you know, found one of those other roles that allowed me to stay close to the code.
Oh, great! I'm gonna steal that answer next time somebody asks that. I was good, never great.
Hey, listen. First of all, I want to thank my panelists, Steve, Sridhar, Mihir. Thank you guys for you know, all the effort gone into putting together. I know your teams put together a lot of the content and the sessions for Converge. I really enjoyed the chat with you all today. To everybody watching, I hope you have a great Converge. I hope you take advantage of all the sessions. We're going to publish them all online so you can go back and rewatch the good ones. Make sure to send us feedback and engage with the community. We're really looking forward to what we're all going to accomplish based on all of this. Thank you all.
Happy coding.
Bye, guys. Everybody, have a great conference.
Happy Converge.